All right, everybody. So back at you, Coach Chase, right here. And so look, previous video, we figure out the Great Depression happens, and we figure out the 6 major reasons why it happens. Now we're in a position where we're saying, okay, it happens, it starts. What do you do? Because like a quote that I like is, life isn't the cards you're dealt, it's how you play them, right? So now we've been dealt these horrible negative cards. How are we going to play them? The president at the time, 1929, is Herbert Hoover. Now, I feel bad for Herbert. Herbert gets a really, really bad historical rap. I'm telling you right now, Herbert Hoover is nowhere near as pitiful and as bad as everybody says he is. I'm not saying he's the Jesus, but he's not that terrible. Now, what does he react to? Well, he's reacting to a economic panic. Now, you remember that we've been looking at economic panics way back to the panic of like 1837, 18 this, 18 that. I mean, 1907 was a panic, and remember that forced everybody to create the Federal Reserve Board in 1913. So there's a lot of panics, economic panics in American history. Now, everybody, I mean 99% of people, and agree with what Herbert Hoover was going to do. Herbert Hoover was going to just say, all right, not that he was going to do nothing. He wasn't going to do nothing, but his focus was going to be, look, the United States government does not go out just passing out money. The United States government does not have any particular programs that just does government expenditure just to create jobs. We don't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus and we're going to talk to the big industrialists, right? Laissez-faire capitalist society, and talk to them and say, look, guys, can you maintain the wage rates, please? Wage rates meaning how much you pay your workers. Look, I know that you are taking a lot of losses, but if you lay off workers, that's one thing. But don't lower how much you pay the workers that you keep. And most industrialists, big industrialists say, yeah, we'll do that for you, right? So you have these kind of situations where you have Herbert Hoover really, truly making some strides and doing things that he needs to do. Herbert Hoover gets a lot of farm recovery going on, a lot of farm aid, getting these farmers to get their prices back up. Herbert Hoover creates the Hoover Dam and spends $140 million on a public works project. That is double what the government has spent in the previous years. So again, I'm not saying that he's horrible. I'm not saying that he's great, but he does make a few strides. But remember, the reason why Herbert Hoover doesn't save us from the Great Depression is that Herbert Hoover was a man of his times. And of that particular time, you allowed private industry and you allowed small government, city, county, and state government to take care of things. The federal government had not taken that huge step yet, because right now you're living and thinking in a world of Social Security. Doesn't exist yet. You're thinking and living in a world of welfare programs like EBT and the rest. Doesn't exist yet. You're living and thinking in a world of people subsidizing public education and even sometimes even finding money to find a way to subsidize expensive private school. It doesn't work that way. You're living and thinking in a time of vouchers and charter schools. None of those things exist yet. And so you have to understand that Herbert Hoover was a man of his time, and that's the way he dealt with the situation. Now, historically, when you read everything, it failed. Again, absolute pitiful failure. Banks, I mean, you have 2,000 banks closing in 1931. All right, that's tough, especially when you have an election in 1932. So what happens in 1932? A rich, older, handsome politician by the name, career politician by the name of Franklin D. Roosevelt, who's a distant cousin of my favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt. Go Teddy, comes in and he says, I'm going to do something about this. I am going to use the federal government, the strength of the federal government to change what happens here, and we're going to fix it. And guess what? That's what happens. And so again, Hoover did a few things. Remember Hoover Dam? He put forth a few programs, but when it boils down to it, wasn't nearly enough. He didn't do nothing, but he didn't do enough. So FDR is in charge now. Now we're going to talk about the first 100 days. 100 days is, a little bit more than 3 months, like they talk about P90X get buff in 90 days. Well, 3 months and 10 days, right? And so in 3 months and 10 days, FDR is going to put his stamp on on the American economy and pretty much start the process of the first New Deal. Now let's talk about this. First and foremost, what is this man going to do? FDR is going to close the banks. Yeah, he's going to close the banks. And he's going to call it a bank holiday. He had a suggestion to call it a bank moratorium, but the word moratorium, especially my Spanish speakers out there, you know, muerte means death. You can't really just say it's a bank death during the Depression, right? So your boy creates a bank holiday, 4-day bank holiday. And what ends up happening is that people were just pulling their money out the banks, rushing to the banks, going crazy, taking money out the banks. In this particular case, if you can't go to the bank and take your money out and demean the system and undermine the system, guess what? What's going to happen is the bank will be pretty stable and you'll be calmed out. So a lot of banks didn't crash and a lot of banks didn't go kaput because they were stable. Now, that's number one, basic just psychology. But it wasn't just psychology. FDR sent inspectors into these banks. And the banks that were failing, the government would take them over. Or he would go to a solid bank and say, you solid bank A, you got to take over failing bank B. And made sure people's money was safe. And then he created the system called the FDIC, where federal deposits, right? Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, meaning that if you put a money in a bank in the United States, it will be safe up to a certain amount. At that point, it was 100,000. Nowadays, it's a little bit higher. If you put money in this bank, we will make sure the security was from the United States of America, not this fly-by-night bank. And so you inspect the banks, you make sure they're solid, you close the poor ones and make the stronger ones take them over to have the federal government take them over. Now, you woke up Monday morning, your bank was shaky. You go to bed Thursday night, guess what? Your bank is strong and you have securities. Makes you feel a little better, psychology, and real common economic sense, all right? So that's step uno. Plain and simple. That's the first thing FDR does, right? Now, let's talk about a few other things that Mr. Roosevelt does. And that's, and you know, I'm a big fan of FDR. You guys know how it goes. Now, one thing you have to talk about with FDR and the New Deal is this. He has 3 facets. The 3 R's. It's not reading, writing, and arithmetic. It is relief. It is recovery. And it is reform. He's going to come out there and say, look, initially, relief, here's some money. Just take care of things. And so he wants to create things, like we said. He's going to do the bank holiday, right? That's number 1. Number 2, he's going to create something called the Civilian Conservation Corps. We'll talk about that more in another video or even in class, right? But the CCC creates jobs for young people, all right, immediately. Works Progress Administration, another job thing. And then you have the Emergency Banking Relief Act, all right? So you have a situation where you seriously have someone just trying to fix it, almost like putting Band-Aids on everything. That's step 1. That's the relief part. Now the recovery part. Now, when you look at recovery, you have to talk about taking steps to really build up the whole system, big picture systems, to build up the system and to make sure the country is solvent economically. And then you have reform. Now, when you do reform, you talk about regulatory agencies. Remember in my previous video, I told you that it was like the wild, wild west with the stock market. Guess what? FDR sets up the Securities and Exchange Commission, and now you have to be accountable for how you play on the stock market. You just can't go in there as crazy as you used to go in there. No, there's a new sheriff in town, literally, if you want to talk about the Wild Wild West, right? So you have the Securities and Exchange Commission. You create safeguards like the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, still exists. Things of that nature, right? And making sure you create something called the Social Security Act. At this point, you have people, older people, living to be 55, 65, 75, 85, whatever age they are. And because they can't work, because you don't want your Nana working. You really want Nana working? Come on, she's not going to be doing a great job. And so you have Nana working into 85 and just dying old and having nothing if she doesn't have a built-in inheritance or all kind of money, right? So what you have now is the Social Security Act. And what it allows you to do is to put money into the system throughout your life, and by the time you become elderly, you have someone protecting you, and you have and your money that you earn protecting you. All right, so make sure you understand 3 facets: relief, recovery, reform. Now, let's talk about the first 100 days, right? And in the first 100 days, man, look, if you've ever been in a relationship, right, when you first start dating, it's called a honeymoon, or you get married, everything is good. It doesn't matter. You know, if they burp, that burp smell nice. They fart, that fart smell nice, right? Everything is okay. And so what we're going to call this the honeymoon between FDR and Congress. And they come together and they know we have to fix the United States economy. So we're going to get moving in this first 100 days. It's 3 months, right? So first thing they do is they create the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And what happens is, remember we talked about that farm prices went down, there was too much produce and everything. Well, farmers were getting paid, guess what? To not have to farm. So you say, they'll tell farmers, look, we'll pay you, we'll subsidize you not to farm because we don't want you to put too much into the market because it brings prices down and that hurts you. All right, so that's one thing initially, and that do, right? Now, in addition to that, you're going to look at something like the Tennessee Valley Authority. The Tennessee Valley Authority, there's the Tennessee River and that whole valley that runs through there. You're going to create hydroelectric power. What you do is you use a river to create a current and you get power. Now, why is that important? Well, number one, it puts power into rural areas in the 1930s United States that didn't have electricity yet. Yeah, it's weird to think about that in the United States. Like, it just feels like we've always been industrial. We always had everything that we need to have. But there are parts that did not have electricity. So Tennessee Valley Authority comes in that first 100 days and puts you in a position where you get electrical power, and also you have industries over there, right? And then you have to build all of these power plants. You have to create the dams and everything. So that gives immediate relief, meaning people have jobs. And then it becomes a recovery situation because it lasts for a period of time, right? So you see how the 3 R's are coming in and being involved in the whole process, right? Now, it wasn't all fun and games. A lot of private industry did not like the Tennessee Valley Authority because they, when the dams were done and the electricity was done, it actually gave people lower rates on electricity. So you would go with the government electricity instead of the private electricity, and obviously sometimes it will bankrupt private companies. So FDR is not loved all the time. But remember, first 100 days, honeymoon. All right. Now, the last one is the Glass-Steagall Banking Act, right? And then obviously the Glass-Steagall Banking Act creates the FDIC. And that's a reform package. So you see in that first 100 days, FDR creates 15 different programs, federal programs. He and Congress come together to create 15 programs to do the 3 R's. Again, the 3 that I wanted to focus on that I thought were most important was agricultural adjustment, to really truly deal with the situation with the farmers. Tennessee Valley Authority to create more jobs. There's a work starting program, right? And so that connects with the CCC and the WPA, the Public Works and the Conservation Corps, because they all come together to build the Tennessee Valley. And then Glass-Steagall is a reform program that does what? Obviously becomes a situation where we change the way we bank and the deposits that we have on banks, FDIC. All right? So that is the first 100 days. That is how Hoover does it and fails, and that's how FDR kind of gets the ball rolling, gets things rolling. All right, thank you so much.